This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine.
Welcome to Strangers No More, where all people are loved with the love of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In the household of faith, there are to be no strangers, no foreigners, no rich and poor, no outside others. As fellow citizens with the saints, we are invited to change the world for the better, from the inside out, one person, one family, one neighborhood at a time.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, welcome to Strangers No More. And if you might notice, if you are watching our YouTube show and not listening to the podcast, you'll notice that we look a little bit different today. And I will tell you that Bradley is here. He's just not on video yet. Dennis, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yes, this is quite an honor. We have Sister Becky McIntosh joining us from Lehi, Utah. And I'm going to give just a brief introduction of how I met Becky. Is back when I was looking into the church, I found her video on mormonandgay.lds.org called The McIntosh Story. And I watched that like a dozen times. And I literally fell in love with Becky as a mother figure, as a friend figure. And I immediately sent her a friend request on Facebook. And I was elated. I mean, I was jumping and dancing when I saw that she accepted it. And we originally became Facebook friends. And then when I was in Utah for 4.5 months doing devotionals, firesides, and book signings in August of 2019, we actually got to meet in person. And she has just been, I call her my therapist, even though she's technically not a therapist. But whenever I have a faith crisis, and it's usually late at night, I will be texting her going, oh, somebody just sent me a death threat or anti-mail. And she's like, calm down, don't reply. Contention never wins. So with that, I'm gonna turn this over to Sister Maggie Slate.
Welcome, Becky McIntosh, author of Love Boldly and mom of a gay son. Hi, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invite to be with you, lovely people. I'm excited about this.
I absolutely adored your book. I don't have the print copy, but see if I can get it in focus there. I downloaded not only the Kindle version, but also the audio because I have to have an immersion read due to my own disabilities. But I tell you, I kind of chuckled. I wowed. And I thought I made it through the whole book without crying. But then there's a section that your husband wrote at the very end. And not only did he write it, but in the audio, he reads it in the audio version. And yeah, I didn't get through that without crying. That was it. I lost it. So why don't you introduce our audience a little bit to your story? I'm gonna give you a little bit of a start with, on page 17 you wrote, you couldn't think of anything worse than having a gay son.
Yeah. So that was my culture and upbringing. Unfortunately, I had never dove into really understanding. I just had my own, black and white idea of what it meant to be gay. And that had to be that was a choice that they were making. And why would they choose something like that? So I'll back up a little bit. So I have 7 children. And they're all now adults and raising children of their own. But it was our number 3rd child, who is our third, also our middle son. We have 3 boys and 4 daughters. So Sean, who was our middle son, he is our gay son. And at age 24, he finally mustered enough courage to send his father and I a private message, text message, informing us that he was gay, and that
he did that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
He did that over Facebook.
He did a private Facebook message.
Right.
The night before he was to head back to his last year at BYU Hawaii at school. So he knew he was going to come out to us, or he felt he really needed to while he was home for that 3-week Christmas vacation. But it was literally in the 11th hour. Like, it was at 11 o'clock at night. And the night before he was to fly home. So he had carried that with him for so long, and even knowing he was going to come out to us, waited for that very last minute. And as a mother, I thought I had created that safe space in my home, and my kids knew that they could tell me anything, but this was obvious that I had not. And he had grown up hearing homophobic things said in the home, and wasn't quite sure how safe it would be to come out. And that is really, really sad that was the reality.
When he headed back to BYU Hawaii, you had given him instruction, didn't you? And
what
was that instruction?
Yeah. So when he texted us, he was out saying his goodbyes to his friends. So he wasn't at home when the text came through. And I immediately called him up and I said, hurry home, got your text, we got to talk about this. And he said, yeah, I want to talk about it. But can you imagine how scared he was to come home and have this conversation? And one of the first things I said to him was, well, we need to get you into the doctor, because obviously your testosterone is out of whack, because, girls like guys, guys like girls. And if you're not attracted to girls, something's out of whack. So let's.
Heck, my testosterone's out of whack. My testosterone's out of whack. I'm not sure. I guess I should.
Becky, you just had me laughing. I had to mute myself for a second because it reminds me of when you sent me a text. Would you mind sharing that? If not, we can just move on. It was hilarious. I've never laughed so hard in my life.
I don't remember what you're talking about, Dennis. If you remember it, you can share it.
Okay, so you said, the funny thing is I recommended my son to go on testosterone, but I just now had to call my doctor and beg him for treatment because of my hot flashes for going through menopause.
So I actually want to stop a second and say, Bradley, what would you have done if your mom had said that?
That's funny because my mom didn't say that, but it has been a bit of a learning process for both me and my parents, where they have said things that have been hurtful and have not quite been what I would have liked, and so I just kind of had to be patient and work through that with them. It would have been really hard to hear my mom say something like that, oh, you need to get some treatment for this. I would have been like, well, I'm not even doing anything. Because it took me several more years later after coming out to them that I even made a decision to date or anything like that. So at the time, yeah.
Just for perspective, Becky, Bradley, I don't know if you know, he is a 23-year-old gay man. He is part of our cast here, part of our hosts. He is openly gay and in his last term at BYU in Provo.
Yep.
And actually,
wonderful. So my son is just a little bit older than you when he finally mustered that courage to come out.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Bradley?
Interestingly enough, yeah, I was on my mission when I discovered the Mormon and Gay website. And so it was partly those videos of your story that influenced my decision to come out to my parents.
Oh, that
That's
makes
great.
me happy to hear that. So my son, when I responded that way, he just laughed. He said, Mom, it's not testosterone. That is not the problem here. And we spent the next 4 hours talking. And at the beginning, I did more of the talking. All of a sudden, I'd become this expert on a subject that I really knew nothing about. But
That's
And
why I
then when
tend to shut up on these calls like this, because
when I finally stopped to listen and I listened to him sharing what it was like growing up with these feelings and to have to keep that to himself and navigate this himself and figure this out himself, that broke my heart. And he said, Mom, you're the first person that I have talked to about this. And that was two-sided. That was, I broke my heart to think that he had kept that to himself, that I had not created that safe space. And for 24 years, he navigated that himself. That broke my heart. And then on the flip side, I thought, well, that's okay, because he's going to marry a woman. And so he hasn't told anyone that he's gay. And so that's good, because then we don't have to explain it to anybody when he does marry a woman. So that was still my mind, my process. But he gave me a lot of food for thought and asked me to do some reading. And that basically that sent me on my journey to seek to understand of how we navigate this. Because I knew, number one, that I loved him with all my heart. And number two, we were keeping him in the family. And I just had to figure this out and seek to understand. So it sent me on a journey that has turned out to be one of the best things. It's funny that God knows what we need to grow and to come closer to him and to strengthen our relationship with him and strengthen the relationship with my children. I mean, I learned things that I could not have learned in any other way. For that, I'm deeply grateful.
That's incredible. I absolutely loved your book. How many years now has it been since Sean came out?
So he came out to us in 2012. So what is that? 9 years? If I'm doing the math right, I don't know. It wasn't until 2014, 2 years later after it come out, that I felt very strongly that I needed to come out of my own rhetorical closet and speak publicly about being a Latter-day Saint mother of a gay son, and speak about the reality of this dynamic in our family, and speak about embracing my son and embracing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because I knew people who were leaving the church, feeling like they had to make that decision to either embrace the gospel or embrace their child. And so they were leaving the church. Or else I had heard too many stories of families kicking their son or daughter out. And that just was totally wrong.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, that just was not happening.
Well, for me, as coming from a convert's point of view, it was actually the members of the church kicking their kids out for being gay. They probably kept me from converting for quite a while, or from even asking the questions that would lead to that, because I didn't understand that. I came out when I was 15 as being bisexual at that time. My daughter came out to me when she was around the same age as being bisexual. It's interesting because now I classify myself as asexual, but she also finds herself within that spectrum, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting process for trauma survivors, of which I am one, and so is my daughter. And I was doing a little bit of research, reading and thinking and pondering, and it occurred to me, and I was actually shared this with Dennis, was that actually a large preponderance of the LGBTQIA people that I know, whether they're in the church or not, are trauma survivors.
Mm.
And it made me wonder if, as a parent, and this is irrespective of the church, but as a parent, do we not want our children to go down a path that is more likely to lead them to being a trauma victim?
Yeah.
Well, I can guarantee we can put the trauma on one of our LGBTQ kids by not understanding what they're going through and not trying to understand it. Trying to, yeah.
Right, absolutely. To me, the gospel is love. You know, family is central to God's plan. So let's keep the family together and intact. And that comes through seeking to understand one another and respecting one another and loving one another. To me, I would not be living the gospel if I was not loving my son and loving all my LGBTQIA brothers and sisters. I just lost my train of thought where I was going with all that.
It's okay.
I'm going to take a real quick break. I'm going to cut this out later. I'm going to teach everyone a really good trick about muting. If you take your mouse and put it on the screen that's in the video, make sure the mouse pointer's on the video screen, the Zoom video screen. Then if you hit the space bar and hold it down, you can talk. And then if you let it, then you hit the space bar again, it comes back on. So Maggie, for your situation, you can keep it muted and then you can space bar it. Except for she's telling me she can't do that. She must be on an iPad, so never mind.
I am on my Note 9, you know that.
That's right. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Does it work?
But still a good trick for anyone else. Sorry, I'll cut.
Okay.
I did think of something that was along that line of the trauma that we create. Most of the time, unintentionally, we are creating trauma, not realizing. Okay, I'm going back to like we're in church, okay, in a Sunday school or a Relief Society or you know, priesthood quorum session. And if something is said that is unloving or judgmental, or we need to raise our hand and to correct and to bring that love and understanding in. It's when nobody says anything to oppose what we are hearing is wrong, that someone in the room who is LGBTQIA or has a loved one or a friend who is, they're being traumatized, they're being hurt if we're not standing up and saying something. So whenever we have that opportunity to speak up and to share our story or to share, point them to the church website or point them to some quote or scripture that brings in loving and understanding, then we are contributing to that trauma that's being put out there.
That gives me chills what you just said, Becky, because when I tag you on posts on Instagram, 99% of them is because somebody doesn't feel comfortable going to our church, or they haven't been to a sacrament meeting in 4, 5, 6 years. And I say, go with myself, go with Becky McIntosh, go with her husband, Scott, go with Richard Osler. You will not feel judged if you walk in a ward with them, because they will make sure you're protected.
I appreciate Becky's point of view, because we need them in all the wards. We can't, I mean, it's not scalable for Becky McIntosh to travel around the world and accompany people to a sacrament meeting and to, but so it's very important that we get these allies and people who even if they like me, I come to this not understanding most of it, but hoping to get a better compassion out of these conversations, so that when these things happen, I can speak up and say, that's not your call to make, whether how they are or what that's not for you to make. And so yeah.
There's a quote I quoted Carol McConkie in my book. She has a video that's on the church website called, I think it's Loving One Another. And I'm going to have to put on my glasses here to be able to see this. But I love this video and this quote from her so much. She said, and Sister Carol McConkie, she was on the General Young Women's Board and also the General Relief Society Board. She may have even been a counselor. I don't quote me on that right now, but she's on the general board. She said, we need to do this differently. We need to be deeply aware of what the purpose of coming to church on Sunday is, and make sure that everyone who comes feels loved, needed, accepted, and lifted. Everybody has struggles we don't know about. It's so important that we be aware that everyone around us is loved of God, and that we need to see them through Christ-like eyes. We cannot allow judgment to dictate the way we interact with people. It just simply is not right. She goes on to say, we just cannot be or even call ourselves a disciple of Christ if we are not helping others along the path. The gospel of Jesus Christ does not marginalize people. People marginalize people, and we have to fix that. We need to be sensitive and love them and allow them the opportunity to grow and to blossom and to be their best selves. They have talents and abilities and personalities that are needed in the kingdom of God. When anyone's shadow darkens the door of a chapel, they ought to feel immediately embraced and loved and lifted and inspired.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Becky.
I think I'm allergic to that quote.
Oh, and you should watch the video. It's like a 3-minute video of her expressing this, and I cry every time. I've probably seen it 30 or 40 times. It's one of my favorites.
Well, I actually want to share a quote from your book that is my favorite scene.
Oh.
You start out with, I was also extended a tender mercy when the opening song was one of my favorites, because I have been given much. As I sat there with one arm around my unwed pregnant daughter and my other arm around my gay son, gratitude filled my heart and the tears began to flow. 2 of my children were with me at church and had come of their own accord. That's the part that gets me. I'm a convert. I came to the church alone. My children aren't in the church. So when I read that, it just broke my heart and filled it with so much love. I want every member of our church to be like Becky McIntosh. I want
Amen.
Every member of our church to take on your example and to learn to love boldly. I don't care what their relationship with is to anybody who's LGBT. I just want like you love.
And I second that. And I know, Bradley, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think Becky's amazing. And I've come to your house a few times actually for Family Home Evening. I've seen you.
I see your face now.
Yeah, here I am. I'm here now. I saw you at the North Star Conference. So I've heard your story. I've met you, and I just appreciate what you do. And I haven't gone around to reading your book just yet, but I plan to.
No, I will not hold that against you. Oh, and and I appreciate your comments, but it's not being like me. I am far from perfect, as anyone who close to me will tell you. it's being like our Savior. I mean, that is how Jesus Christ would treat any one of us in any situation, in any scenario. He would be there with his arm around us. He would be there next to us. He would be walking with us and lifting us and praising us and loving us. So that is my focus, is trying to be like him. And walking this journey with my son, I truly feel has magnified or helped me to grow in Christ-like attributes. And I still have a long ways to go, but I find that whenever I respond to any situation or scenario with love, or as Dennis mentioned earlier, how would Christ respond? Like, that is when love fills my heart and peace comes and I feel joy. Soon as you bring judgment into a situation, like, the relationship is halted. there's wedges. I mean,
you say that you pause and ask yourself if your words and actions are going to keep the line of communication open with your LGBTQ loved one, or if they will create a wedge and distance in your relationship. And you say that stopping to ask yourself that simple question before you react has served your relationship well.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of advice for other parents and other people along those lines.
Well, absolutely. And I had to learn that on the journey, because it was a lot easier as a parent at the beginning when I knew Sean was at BYU and he was living the honor code. And so I didn't have so much to worry about. And I didn't know if he was going to date men or, what the future held. This was all new to me, and I didn't know what was in the future. But when Sean did start dating and had met someone that he wanted to bring home to meet the family, that's when I had to ask myself those questions. When I wondered, how am I going to respond? Well, are you going to respond in a way that will build a wedge and drive him further from the family, or respond with love that will strengthen relationship and can keep the communication open and provide a space where he wants to come home and he wants to be with a family? I mean, it's a no-brainer, at least to me. I wanted to create a relationship where he felt comfortable and loved and respected. And that only comes with honoring his agency and seeking to understand him and trusting him. That when I would respond in that way, that's when the peace and love and all of that's when that comes.
Well, this also ties into Elder Oaks, because Elder Oaks' daughter lives in Alpine, and I believe they had a family, the Oaks family reunion about in 2019 when I was out there, and Elder Oaks' grandson is gay and got married to a man. And it's my understanding that Elder Oaks was extremely, affectionate and loving and Christ-like when he met his grandson's husband. And that is exactly what Christ would do. And that's exactly what you're doing. Is we may not know all the answers, but you're living like Christ. You're asking, what would Jesus do? What would Christ do? And that's a huge example. But wasn't it your Scott, your husband, Brother McIntosh, he really learned a Christ-like example from listening to your son when they were driving back from a camping trip. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah. So yeah, when Sean would come home for Christmas, that was really the only time that we would see him. And my husband is a big outdoorsman and a big hunter. And one of the traditions is going on a hunting trip. And they were going to be in a truck together for 3 hours driving. And before Sean had come home for Christmas, he had sent his dad a message and said, "Hey, Dad, can we really talk this time when I'm home, like really talk. And Scott knew what he meant, because Scott had been avoiding talking about his sexual attraction. And but they were on this hunting trip, and they was on their way back home. And Sean said to him, you know, I thought we were going to talk, Dad, and really, really talk. And so Scott said to him, well, they started going back and forth, expressing what they wanted to talk about. And Scott then said, Sean, but why would you choose this? Why? And Sean said, Dad, I didn't choose this. Why would I choose to be in a group that is so misunderstood? And just when he said that, Scott said, it just hit him over the head, just a ton of bricks, like, yeah, why would he choose this? He didn't choose this. So all of a sudden, all this just went flooding through Scott's mind. Like all of a sudden, this light bulb went on. And then that made him think, wow, if he didn't choose this, then, you know, how have I responded to him? And he thought all the mean things he had said, homophobic jokes and things that he had said to Sean as, when Sean was growing up, all that came flooding back to Scott. And every time Scott speaks about this, he just starts crying, just thinking about it. But that's when it finally hit him, like, he didn't choose this. And here I've been adding to his pain. And it just made him walk in my son's shoes. So, like, what has he had to deal with? And realized what a resilient and strong person that he was, especially to grow up in our home and hearing such homophobic things being said and taught. So yeah, that was a beginning, a turning point for Sean. I mean, my husband Scott's transformation, and he tells his story and journey in that final chapter that Maggie talked about in my book. And I think that the church did a fantastic job too, I think, of portraying that part of the story in the 6-minute video of our family.
Yeah, I watched that a couple of days ago. I really enjoyed that as well. I want to pick on Dennis for a second. Dennis, how would you feel if your parents had responded to you coming out like the McIntoshes?
I still experience that from what they were in the beginning when Sean came home. I still experience that horrible. My mother related to me as a murderer. She said, you know, if you were a murderer and in jail and killed somebody, we would still love you, but we wouldn't love what you did. And that's how she sees me being gay. And I see Becky, and I see all the other parents that I serve with, and how wonderful our members have been towards me. And I want that so badly. Becky sent my parents her book, with a beautiful inscription, a beautiful message and a note. And Becky received a beautiful message back. And I still don't know if my parents read that book. And I pray every day that they do.
I pray that they do as well. Bradley, do you have something that you would like to ask Becky?
It's a good question. I think I am just reminded. Sorry?
I was just reflecting on the fact that you said that you knew Becky from before.
And I've talked with her, at least briefly, a little bit. I don't know, I just am reminded of all these other people that I interact with, and hearing stories of people coming out to their parents, and even getting messages from parents. And it's hard because it is a process for people to learn, to kind of unlearn what they've been taught growing up. And I wish it didn't have to be that way. Like, I wish it was just like a second nature to love people and to want them to feel welcome and loved. And we didn't have to put so much effort and make so many resources for people. Like it just seems like if you do nothing, you're going to end up hurting someone, but it takes a lot more effort to actually make someone feel welcome. So sometimes that's kind of heavy to think about.
It's a good perspective, though. Becky, you towards the end of your book, you give a lot of advice for other people. You advise what type of questions to ask and what types of things to say and not say. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
Sure. Yeah, so I share things that I learned. I'm so open and real and vulnerable in my book. Like I share a lot of mistakes that I made, things that I learned the hard way of not to say or what not to say. But one of the things that I really advise parents and friends and is to not assume something, but to ask questions and then listen to understand. Let them share their story. Let them share their hopes and dreams. Let them share how they would like you to best support them and walk this journey with them. And as far as saying gay or same-sex attracted, I say, ask them what they prefer, how they identify themselves, and respect that, and to mirror the language that they use, and not to assume that they need to refer to themselves as a certain way, or let them teach you and help you. I'm trying to think what I said in that chapter. I don't know.
You mentioned to ask questions like, what has this been like for you?
Yeah.
What is the hardest part? Or how can I best support you?
Yeah. Yep. Great questions. Those are it.
I just loved your book. I recommend it for every person out there who is dealing with questions in regards to this. Even if you think you might have a friend who might be gay, pick up the book. Pick up the book, seriously. Andrew, I want to ask if you have any questions for Becky. I know that you've got a couple of friends that are LGBTQ and you have been communicating with them.
I think most have been answered. The question I had in my head was, what would you tell someone in coming from a straight perspective, how to begin to understand this? I think in my mind, I wonder if it's okay for people to make mistakes as long as they're trying. And I was curious what you think about that.
Yes, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to say the wrong thing. But be quick to ask for forgiveness, or to help, to ask them to share their perspective, or to help you to understand. Oh gosh. This is the COVID brain kicking in.
No, that's okay. I think that's kind of where the reason I bring that up is because I think I think there's a lot of people who they want to be compassionate, but they're nervous and scared of how, first of all, they'll be perceived by others in the ward, in the ward,
Gotcha.
and also how they might say the wrong thing and make things worse. And I think a lot of people sit in that category of, I don't want to make things worse one way or the other, whether it's the wrong perception for other people, or whether it's I said the wrong thing to Bradley and now I've really upset him and he's never going to come to church again, right? And I've probably said a few things on this podcast that luckily Bradley's good, because I'm sure I make mistakes that way. But and I just kind of wonder what your thoughts on that.
I would say anything that you say that is kind and uplifting and positive is going to be a good thing. Lee, cast the judgment aside and just love and be a friend and just be there for one another. You can't go wrong if you're just a friend, and you do a lot more listening. Oh, sorry. Are you still there? I don't see you anymore.
Yep. We're here.
That was, so you can't go wrong with just being a friend and just being there for one another and listening and just treat others the way they would want to be treated, which is kindness and respect. And you can't go wrong.
I have some thoughts on that. I think in addition to that, people remember more how you make them feel rather than what you say necessarily. And so if you're consistently making someone feel loved and respected and supported, even if you say something that's not quite what they want to hear, I mean, that might have a little bit of an effect, at least temporarily, but overall, they're not really going to hold you against that. They're not going to remember that. And then additionally, going back to what was said earlier about like asking questions, something that I wish happened more often to me is I wish people would ask me the question of like, why do you love being gay? Or why do you love being a member of the church? Because often these conversations that we have with people, they assume that I hate it. And they assume that it's hard, and it is hard. And so that's why I have these conversations, because it's tricky to navigate. But there's a lot of things that I love about it and that I am grateful for. And so I kind of have learned to almost, I guess, not regret, but like not look forward to having these conversations because they typically tend to be negative, when I wish we could focus a little bit more on like the positive of like, why do you love being who you are? And so that these conversations aren't always filled with the uncomfortable feelings of, oh, well, how do you get past people that say mean things to you? And how do you overcome these things? Like, those are good conversations, but that's not the only conversation I want to have.
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I tell people that reach out to me that have just come out to their parents, I say, keep the conversation going. Like, don't let it die. Let your parents know that you want to talk about it. You want their questions. And the same with parents or other people that reach out to me. I say, they ask them their story. Let them share about themselves. And I love, Bradley, that you said that you wish people asked what you loved about this, what you loved about being a member of the church. Why I think so many people follow Dennis on Instagram is because he's so positive and it's positive energy, and people like to be around positive, uplifting, loving people. So I know when you were saying that, Bradley, it reminded me back before I was public about sharing our story. On 2 different occasions, I was in a group where this topic came up and something negative was said, and my heart would just start pounding. And then I would step forward, and these 2 times that come to my mind, I said, I have a gay son, and he is the most wonderful human being I know. And I just started spewing out all these positive qualities about my son. And I said, what the things that you are saying are not true, or not in line with who I know. And their mouths would just drop. And then both of those times, several people in the group then reached out to me and said, thank you so much for sharing that. And I have to remind myself that until my son came out, I had those same kind of thoughts and feelings. And so if we don't speak out and share our stories, then it's not going to change until their son or daughter or someone close to them comes out. But what you're doing in this podcast is wonderful, you know, sharing stories. And I know there are so many resources now in this conversation than there were, you know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, that it's helping to change the culture. It's helping to bring understanding and more light. And I hope more love and understanding. I see it happening, and you're part of that by stepping forward and sharing your stories and your light and love. It's those stories that touches hearts, that change hearts and changes culture, and helps to create a safe space and help those youngins and those teenagers now that are growing up, and to help to make it safer for them so they don't have those traumatic experiences that many of you have experienced.
Thank you, Becky. And you definitely are, you are definitely creating so much more of a safe space in this world for so many people. I actually want to take a moment and say out there to our audience, if you are a person who is feeling nervous, no matter how old you are, I don't care if you're teens, I don't care how old you are. Find somebody who you feel safe with and tell your story, and keep telling it, because your story matters. We need to hear your story. We all need to hear your story. Becky, I want to finish with, you say that frequent temple attendance helps you focus on the promises made between God and yourself, and you are able to view life from an eternal perspective. How has that changed over the last year?
Not being able to attend the temple.
Yeah.
I know. I miss it. I miss it so much. But I have discovered that I'm able to create that same feeling in my home that I feel in the temple by creating that sacred space where I spend with God. And my focus is reading the scriptures or listening to a Come Follow Me podcast or something, but just inviting that spirit in. It's not the same as the temple, but the same. Like, you can bring that into your home by creating that space, by inviting the spirit and by inviting God into your space. I can feel his love in my home like I feel it in the temple. The one thing about going to the temple is, you know, you leave your phones outside and all the distractions are gone. But you can also create that in your home, to leave all those distractions aside and just commune with you and God in whatever that looks like for you.
That's a fantastic suggestion, Becky. Does anybody else have anything else they want to ask or add?
Will you be my Facebook friend? That's all I say. I'll do it.
Absolutely. I would be honored to have you include me in your friend circle.
I think Becky brought up a really good point about, or even Andrew, we need more people in our church. We need you in our church. But that goes back to what a general authority shared with me. We need more gay people sharing charity in the pure love of Christ. We need more LGBT people in our wards showing their presence. And
Absolutely.
So I just say, love boldly and read Becky's book.
Yes.
Oh.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Becky, for joining us. I so much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this fabulous book of yours. I recommend everybody go out and pick up Love Boldly wherever you pick up your books. It's published by Cedar Fort, and they usually have some really good deals. So Love Boldly by Becky McIntosh. Thank you so much, Becky, for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. What an honor to get to communicate with each of you through virtually. Yeah. So
well, you are our absolute first guest, and I think we chose very perfectly. You are the perfect person to come on here and share your love for Jesus Christ and your love for your LGBTQ family. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we hope that your week ahead is full of love and light of Jesus Christ. We love you, and so does God.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.